Hey, the first one is kind of an interesting one. Auto racing superstitions and bizarre events. And Alan Isselhard, your program. Just take it away. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be talking about superstitions, bizarre events, good and bad luck events, and some rituals also. And I'd like to begin by sharing a brief dictionary definition of the word superstition: beliefs or practices resulting from ignorance, fear of the unknown, trust in magic, or chance, per Webster Dictionary. Now, if I were to go around the room and ask everyone in the room to tell me what racing superstition they hear most often, and I guess it's green race cars. Or possibly it could be the number 13. You don't want number 13 on your race car. And the third choice is peanuts. And I wondered, where did these superstitions develop? How did they happen? So I started to do a little bit of research on those three items. Racing's green superstition, I believe, may have started right here in central New York at the Syracuse Fairgrounds on the 1 mile dirt oval racetrack. I got to do the first one. I got to do the first one now. Where's the, okay, thank you.
Yep. Tell you what, just for a moment here. Bear with us, folks. There we are. Okay.
Go ahead.
What you're seeing is the cover of the race program for one of the races at the Syracuse Fairgrounds. And this program was printed for the race held on September the 16th, 1911, for the race at Syracuse. On September 16th, 1911, a huge crowd of spectators witnessed one of the worst auto racing accidents in American history. It occurred at the Syracuse Fairgrounds when 11 race fans were killed and 10 others were injured when driver Lee Oldfield, his green Knox race car, number 11, blew a tire during the race and careened into the turn 2 infield and plowed through a light fence into a group of spectators. Oldfield was thrown from the car, but only received minor injuries. Oldfield later said he believed that he was the source of green superstitions in racing. This is Gaston Chevrolet. If the Syracuse wreck was considered the beginning of green car superstitions, it got stronger in later years. Gaston Chevrolet, a race driver and younger brother of Chevrolet Motor Car Company co-founder Louis Chevrolet, competed in a race on November 25th, 1920 at the Beverly Hills Speedway, a board track in California. Gaston Chevrolet lost his life when his green Frontenac race car crashed into the Duesenberg driven by Eddie O'Donnell and his riding mechanic Lyle Joles. All three people lost their lives in that accident. Scant months earlier, Chevrolet had won the Indianapolis 500 in that very same car. By the way, it's interesting to note that the color green was very much in evidence early at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for many years. Most of the seats were painted green. The original shop garage doors were painted green and white. And the races, of course, were started with a green flag. So, and the other thing is green and racing peaked between the 1920s and the 1950s, where the superstition really became prominent. This is NASCAR driver Joe Weatherly. NASCAR's Joe Weatherly was superstitious of everything, particularly the color green and the number 13. Joe Weatherly once refused to start a NASCAR race because he qualified 13th, until he encouraged the promoter. He qualified in 12A position. They used to carry his race car in the back of an open flatbed trailer. Joe and his team owner, Bud Moore, were eating inside a little green mom-and-pop restaurant, roadside restaurant, when a green vehicle backed into the race car, leaving a little green paint on it. Bud said, "We'll paint over it." Joe said, "No, you're not going to do that. You're going to grind that out." So he said, if you paint over it, it's still there. Weatherly was killed in 1964 at Riverside, California, with two $50 bills in a shirt pocket. A superstition now exists that $50 bills should be avoided at racetracks on race days. Many people remember Indy driver Roberto Guerrero winning the pole position for the 1992 Indy 500 and then spinning his green Lola Buick on the second parade lap just before the start, taking himself out of the race and somewhat embarrassed. In 1993, Jeff Andretti drove the same car, again in green livery, and crashed. Guerrero drove the exact same car in 1994, again sporting a green livery, crashed and finished last. The green superstition hung around until the 1980s, when racing sponsors' products were green-oriented and green non-superstitious money was welcomed by the race teams and tracks. This is a car that raced at Oswego Speedway this summer. It's a NASCAR Whelen Asphalt Modified, car number 59. And I took this picture in August, driven by Andy Jankowiak. And I don't think I've seen a greener car anywhere on a racetrack. And I stopped and introduced myself, and he got a kick out of what I was trying to do with accumulating information for this talk. But when you see a pack of cars go around at the beginning of a race and you see a green car like this, it stands out very easily. All right, now this is a little difficult. It took me 3 weeks to learn how to say this word. Triskaidekaphobia, that was pretty close. Triskaidekaphobia, does anybody know what that means? Anybody in here, raise your hand. Oh, we got a couple people that do know what that means. That is fear of the number 13. Well, here is number 13, and obviously this driver and team didn't really care about any superstitions. They were going to make it the way they wanted to. And I don't know when or where this picture was taken or who the driver was, but I got a kick out of the number 13, and also it's upside down, but they drew a cat that's on the black part of the car. And this was, the guy was probably looking at the track 1 minute, and the next minute he was looking at the clouds. But this is what happened to the driver of the number 13 Jalopy Coach stock car. Some drivers are so nervous about the number 16 or 13 that they are reluctant to use multiples of 13, like number 26, 39, and so forth. They're considered unlucky by some teams. A widespread circle track superstition was never having a car number that could be read upside down. According to superstition, the 5 luckiest numbers are 3, 4, 8, 9, 12, 21, and 77. However, these numbers may not be considered lucky by all cultures. In Italy, the number 17 is considered unlucky. In China and Japan, number 4 is supposedly unlucky. And they say number 4 in Chinese sounds very similar to the word death. Indy, from 1926 to 2002, the use of the number 13 on a race car was officially disallowed by the rules. Now, you probably recognize this driver. It's Danica Patrick. She raced with the car number 13, and she didn't mind green either, because her sponsor, the GoDaddy computer people, that's their color, and if they're paying the bill, they're going to see that color on the car and her driver's suit. As a 7-time world champion, most people assume that Michael Schumacher was a driver certain of his skills, but he too believed in a few superstitions. The first and most well-known of these was his penchant for odd race car numbers. This came to the fore in 2010 when he returned to Formula One racing with Mercedes. Initially, he was allotted the number 4, with teammate Nico Rosberg getting the number 3. Schumacher immediately asked for the numbers to be switched. It was initially thought that this was part of the mind games he was known to play to gain advantage over Rosberg, but it turned out to be just a superstition. Schumacher had won all 7 of his world championships while driving a car with an odd number. Another quirk he had was to carry an amulet, a good luck charm, with him during the races that had the initials of his family members. Peanuts. Peanuts are known to be superstitious at auto races. Actually, it's not the peanut itself that's the problem. It's really peanut shells that are problematic. This superstitious issue started when the pit area at some track was behind the grandstands, maybe to be in the shade, and then when spectators broke their peanuts, they tossed the shells underneath the stands, and then they got involved with the drivers and the crew. Some of them went in the carburetors, and that caused major engine failures. Drivers and crew repulsed peanuts for their unlucky reputation, and at some tracks deliberately refused selling peanuts at concession stands. In years past, peanuts were not sold at the Indy 500 concession stands due to their superstitious notoriety. Drivers just hated to see peanut shells around their cars, and they caused major problems. Hard to believe, but there were competitors that deliberately scattered peanuts around their competitors just to shake them up before the race. On September 27th, 1937, AAA sanctioned a 100-mile championship race held in Nashville, Tennessee. A young mechanic, Mac, was walking through the pit area eating peanuts and ridiculing his friend about how anyone could fall prey to the foolish superstition surrounding peanuts in racing. Mac sought to prove how outrageous this peanut fallacy was and deliberately broke peanut shells over the first 5 race cars in line for the feature race. Ted Horn was among them, as well as Duke Nalon, Howdy Cox, Vern Orendorff, and Chet Gardner. Howdy Cox was leading the race as Nalon attempted to overtake him, but having extreme difficulty seeing through the heavy dust on the back straight. Suddenly, a tremendous crash occurred and spectators witnessed racers flipping end over end. This horrible debacle left Ted Horn in critical condition. His race car was destroyed. Nalon and Orendorff were seriously injured, Gardner slightly hurt, and Howdy Cox, the leader, was dead. The 5 cars sprinkled with peanut shells were the 5 cars in this dreadful crash. The peanut superstition was magnified exponentially after this ghastly incident. NASCAR's Robert Yates found out that peanuts were sold from a vending machine in his shop, and upon discovering this, had the peanuts removed. This is a panoramic photo. Indianapolis, before the start of the race in 1935. Beginning with the first Indy 500 in 1911 and until 1957, a panoramic photo was taken of all drivers and officials on the main straightaway just before the 500. The camera and photographer were located on the back of a flatbed farm truck. Superstitious drivers, not wanting to be photographed just before the start of the race, simply didn't line up and posed for the photo and weren't included by their own choice. Some drivers were superstitious about having their photo taken just prior to a race because many thought so often Those photos were included in the newspaper the next day with the caption, "Last photo taken of." Not shaving before a race is still a big superstition today, a common ritual. This superstition started about 1936 when sprint car driver George "Doc" McKenzie was killed in a crash just after shaving his beard before a race on August 23, 1936 at the Wisconsin State Fair. This is NASCAR's Bobby Isaac. Bobby Isaac, 1972 NASCAR champ, dropped out of the 1973 Talladega 500 mid-race in an impulsive decision which surprised his pit crew and team owner. He suddenly pulled into the pits, got out of the race car, and that was it for him for the day. When questioned why he dropped out, Isaac said he heard a voice that told him to quit racing or he would die. He did not participate in any further 1973 NASCAR Winston Cup races after Talladega. The late Davey Allison claimed he would be awakened at night by strange noises when staying overnight at the Talladega track. Also on the weekend of a race, Allison would watch a movie. If he ran well that weekend, the same movie would be watched the next weekend. And of course, Allison was killed at Talladega in the crash of a helicopter that he was piloting. Giuseppe Farina was the winner of the first Formula One World Championship race in 1950 for Alfa Romeo at Silverstone, and was the first world champion driver also. Farina had a medallion of the Madonna della Consigliata, which he always wore, to the extent that when he forgot it at the Dutch Grand Prix in 1953, he dashed off to the hotel so he could get it and nearly missed the start of the race. Well, probably most of you recognize this guy, John Force. John Force would not climb into his Castrol Racer without at least one St. Christopher medal, and sometimes two, around his neck. And he isn't the only driver to carry a St. Christopher medal during a race. Formula One world champ driver Alan Jones won the Formula One title in Canada, but only after the last-minute delivery of his special luck charm, a pair of red underpants. Jones admitted being superstitious and felt uneasy because he thought he had lost them. He contacted his wife in England to search for them, which she did. She found them and sent them to Canada by special express. Retired driver David Coulthard always steps into his race car with his right foot first from the left side of the car. Coulthard also felt he owned a pair of lucky underpants, which he wore in every race. After crashing heavily once, his driver's suit and underpants needed to be removed by cutting them off. When his mother found out he wore 5-year-old, well-used underwear with holes, she forbade him to continue doing this. He complied, but he still took the old underwear with him to the races for good luck. Retired driver from Italy, Stefano Modena, had a strange superstition. If he was in the race car and anyone touched him before leaving the pits to start a race, he would get out of the car and then get back in. Alberto Ascari, a two-time 1950 world champion, had a favorite blue helmet, which he would not allow anyone else to touch. He made an exception after his crash at Monte Carlo in 1955, tossing him into the harbor. His helmet needed repair and was in the shop when, at Monza, Ascari was killed when testing a car wearing his friend Ferrari teammate Eugenio Castelletti's white helmet. After Jim Clark had 2 spins at Indy in 1996, he said the helmet he was wearing was bad luck, and he disposed of it. Retired superstitious Formula One driver Alexander Wurst said he wouldn't sleep in a hotel room with his feet facing the door. He also wore different colored racing shoes on each foot, red on the left, blue on the right, for good luck. Carl Kiekhaefer, a 1950s two-time NASCAR championship car owner and Mercury boat motor manufacturer, wouldn't let his drivers or crew sleep with their spouses the night before a race. Shaking hands just before a race is another superstition. This is among the most common of superstitions, by shaking hands or not shaking hands. I'm not sure which is more superstitious. I've read that A.J. Foyt always wrapped a rubber band around his gear shift lever. He once said, "It's a habit I've had for nearly 50 years in both race and street cars. While I don't consider myself superstition, I figure it doesn't hurt." Most drivers visit the trough just prior to the race. One Southern driver admits to always using the urinal farthest to the left, as it represents the pole position. If that urinal isn't available, he waits till it's free. Jacques Villeneuve, a retired Formula One driver, wouldn't remove his helmet when relieving himself just before a race. Many drivers have superstitions about who buckles them into a race car. In his book, My Speed Was Life, the famous German race manager for the Mercedes Grand Prix team from 1926 to 1955, Alfred Neubauer recalled, "I've known very few race drivers who did not suffer from superstition in one form or another." Here is Neubauer, and on his left is Sterling Moss, and I got to get back to my notes here. And the other gentleman on the other side is Dennis Jacobsen, and this is after they won the 1955 Mille Miglia. This was probably Sterling Moss's greatest victory. Sterling Moss once explained, "Most of the drivers I know are pretty superstitious. Maybe their reasons are the same as mine, that it costs nothing, and therefore you might just as well be superstitious as not. I always carried a gold horseshoe on a chain around my neck, given to me by my sister, and I always tried to wear it the right way up to keep the good luck in it." Tazio Nuvolari wore a golden tortoise charm with the letter N on its back, a present from the famous Italian poet Gabriele D'Annunzio. Following an Irish superstition, Dale Earnhardt Sr. will leave a building walking out the same door he walked in. Wessa Miller was a handicapped child who loved watching NASCAR on TV. She wanted to meet Dale Earnhardt Sr., and through a Make-A-Wish Foundation, she attended the 1998 Daytona 500 and met Earnhardt. Miller had a special gift for Earnhardt, and she believed that it would help give him a little luck. The gift was a penny that she had rubbed for good luck. Following their meeting, Earnhardt found some glue and glued the penny to the dashboard of his race car. He won the Daytona 500 that day. Earnhardt tried to keep the penny, but the penny ultimately stayed with the race car, where it remains to this day in the Richard Childress Racing Museum. Okay, this is Ted Horn. He's one of my favorite drivers of old time. Ted Horn was one of the most obsessively superstitious drivers. Horn would not allow race fans to pose with him for a photo before the race. Horn felt announcing your retirement as a driver before actually doing it was also one of the taboos. Horn admitted that if he found money at a track, it accompanied him in the race car. He found a dime at Arlington, Texas, and put it in a shoe before the race started. He won the race and the championship that day. When he was killed at Duquesne, Illinois, in 1948, a dime was found in his left boot. Ted Horn's Indianapolis 500 record is unequaled for consistency. He finished fourth or better in 9 straight Indy 500 races beginning in 1936, but never won the 500. Ted Horn and fellow driver Bill Holland were good friends. Holland proceeded to win the 1949 Indianapolis 500, and following victory, Holland disclosed that he carried with him during the race the exact same 10-cent piece Ted Horn carried with him when he was killed at Duquesne. Ted Horn's car, by the way, it broke a right front spindle, and the car flipped, and he died from injuries. Ted Horn ignored numerous superstitions the day he was killed. That morning, his wife noted the dress she expected to wear was soiled, and her other dress was green. Horn accepted her wearing the green dress. Also unusual was the fact that she and their child parked in the pit area next to his race car, another custom considered unlucky. He reportedly shaved that morning, again challenging superstition. This is Francois Severt. One of the most bizarre racing stories relates to the late Formula One driver, Albert Francois Severt, who won his first ever Grand Prix at Watkins Glen in 1971. Severt, a French racing driver who was killed at Watkins Glen on October 6, 1973, driving a Tyrrell Cosworth Ford, was trying to qualify for the Grand Prix that year, and he was a teammate of World Championship driver Jackie Stewart. Severt had a long-time relationship with an attractive woman by the name of, pardon my French, Nanou van Melderen. 5 years to her meeting Severt, the young woman went with her mother to see a clairvoyant, the mother being the one seeking advice. But during this meeting, the foreteller told Nanou that she would meet a young man with blue eyes near the sea. In 1964, she met blue-eyed Severt at Saint-Tropez in the Caribbean. 2 years later, Nanou decided to pay the clairvoyant another visit seeking advice about her future. She brought with her a photo of Severt, but didn't tell the clairvoyant anything about him. The seer studied this photo for a long time and said he was a person that had an association with a strange machine. Nanou told the clairvoyant that Severt wanted to be a race driver. The clairvoyant told the young woman that Severt would have a brilliant career in racing, but his success would become between them. She commenced to tell Nanou that the handsome race driver would not live to see his 30th birthday. Later that evening, Nanou told Severt about this exchange. Severt later insisted on seeing the old clairvoyant woman, which he did. The clairvoyant told Severt mostly what she'd already spelled out to his girlfriend and predicted the same thing about his future. Francois would not see the beginning of his 30th year. Of course, you know what happened right over here in the S's, and it was only about a 10-minute walk from here. After Severt was killed, Nanou again visited the clairvoyant and again took a photo of Severt for her to see, except that this photo was Severt as a young child. After studying the photo for a long time, she made this shocking statement: "He is dead." Just as a clairvoyant predicted, Severt left this world before his 30th birthday. Well, that's the end of my comments. If anybody has a question or a comment, now is the time. Anyone?
Okay, questions? What? Well, I thought it was great, Alan. A lot of things I had not aware of. Okay, hang on. Here we go, Ken.
Hi. Thank you. That was an amazing presentation. So wonderful. So you're drawing from so many different places. How did you go about researching this topic and locating information on this theme?
I was lucky to have several people give me stuff because I had appealed for that. I had one bitter disappointment, though. I copied flyers asking race drivers to help me with this, and I passed out dozens of these at Oswego Speedway, and I didn't get one call from a race driver. And I think I was a little disappointed, and I asked several of them about IMRRC, and almost all of them didn't know anything about it. I was really disappointed in that. I don't know what they're paying attention to in their life, but that's...
Yeah.
But it's not IMRRC. But anyway, as far as researching the material, I called old magazines. In some cases, auto racing books in the index said superstition, and it would direct you right to the page. The internet was a big help, of course. And there were a number of articles written about superstitions.
You bring up the superstition about announcing retirement before actually retiring, and didn't Stewart, before that race, because it was supposed to be his 100th race, announce his retirement from the sport before Severt died? Oh, he didn't, that's right. Okay. I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but it's an interesting thought that Stewart was going to retire and then Sever died.
Right. Stewart was supposed to retire on the weekend that Sever got killed here. It was going to be his 100th Formula One race. And, of course, he never got to drive that 100th race because the Terrell team pulled out of the weekend after the death of Sever. Anyone else?
So this is terrific stuff. I'll have to turn my back to you.
Maybe it's a superstition. I don't know.
I'm not going there. So it's good to see you. Do you think drivers are more superstitious than other athletes, and how come?
I understand that baseball players are also very superstitious, and I can't say any other sport because I really don't pay too much attention to other than auto racing. Anybody else?
Yeah, women were not allowed in the pits in oval racing up till not all that long ago. Was there a superstition about women?
Yeah, there was. That's why they weren't allowed into the pits. One year, many years ago, I went to Oswego with my wife, and I said, well, I'll treat you to a pit pass, and we'll get there a little early, and we could walk in the pits and see the cars and drivers close up. She went to where the pit passes are sold, which I'm sure you know about, and they kind of laughed and said, we're not selling you a pit pass because you're a woman. Well, she didn't like that one bit. And there was a police officer at the track that day, and she went right over to him and she said, they won't sell me a pit pass, and I think that's discriminatory. And this police officer didn't want to hear that at all, but it didn't do any good. But I think he did go ask somebody, and the excuse that was given was, there's no ladies' room in the pits.
And I was just going to say, the thing with the photograph before the race, I read somewhere that goes to the Red Baron or something like that. He had his photograph taken for his last mission where he was shot down, and that might have had something to do with not having your photograph taken before a race and stuff like that. And the one with the green, with the car, I read somewhere one time that someone say it started because some of the tracks, like say Terre Haute or Williams Grove or something like that, they had green infield, and drivers would be going and they'd see green out of the side of their eye, figuring it was the grass, but it was a green car and collided with that car or something like that. So I don't know how true that all is, but yeah.
Could happen. I guess, anybody else? Last chance. Well, by the way, let me warn you something. When you go out of this building tonight, there's a cracked sidewalk. Don't step on that crack.
Thank you, Alan. That was great. Really interesting.